We're going to talk about pride.
Pride.
We're going to watch Tanner explain how he tried to groom himself.
I've been thinking really hard about the pride thing because I'm annoyed in that, like, because, you know, when I was a kid and I was a Mormon and I thought, well, homosexuality is weird. That's weird. It's a little strange and God doesn't want you to do that. But I was never like filled with anger and antagonism. And then the gay movement of the 90s convinced me, and they convinced me on the basis of it's personal, it's private, it doesn't affect you. Why can't you just get along? And I went, oh yeah, okay. And for a long time, Pride Day and Pride Festival and Pride Parade, I saw as, like, you know, like if there's a spirit of Christmas and that's giving, the spirit of pride is affirmation and in the face of oppression, right? And that's a message I can totally be behind. I'm 100% behind. But you know what? We're counterculture and we're here and we're going to do it. Even if you don't like us, we're just going to be happy. And now I have watched Pride morph into a religious exclusive thing. It's a safe space, which means that certain kinds of ideas are not welcome here anymore, you know?
And it's a very corporate one.
Yeah, like, because like I actually, you know, I had I had like an internal kind of conundrum because at work, you know, I like to do the Pride Day, you know, we do play music at work, and I do the Pride Day list, you know, and it's just filled with all of these like landmines of like, well, wait a second, you know, like, because, you know, I was talking about making my Pride Gay list, and I was talking about like classically gay music, because everybody says, oh, do Britney Spears, and I'm like, no, I'm not doing that. But like, I don't know, it raises all of these issues where, like, because like John, what's his name, fucking Elton John, when he was in the closet, is that okay to play that, or is music, or is that bad because that represents a time when he gave into oppression? Like, I don't know, there's just a million little things here, and it annoys me because, like, for so long Pride was simple. It was hey, we are who we are and we're going to be it no matter what, and it was happy, it was joyful. Like, that's the thing that really I liked about Pride, was the thing where you can say, you know, you can either let it get you down, or you can say, fuck yeah, I'm going to have fun no matter what. Because I think, like, our generation, like our peers that are gay, fall roughly into two categories. There are the people who just internalized all the hatred and are miserable and depressed and angry and filled with resentment. And then there are the people who said, fuck it, I'm going to have fun in spite of you and your bitchy attitude, you know? And that I'm going to have fun in spite of you thing is the thing I love. But I'm seeing the angry, resentful part taking over the affirmative part.
Well, there's a reason in what would now be the last episode that I started out talking about scrupulosity, is because the guy pointed out to how you can kind of turn anything into an infinite list of impossible to follow rules. And it doesn't just have to be a religion. Maybe some religions play more into that. But the religion of the queer world is loaded with infinite impossible rules that you could beat yourself up about forever, and they can infight about forever. And that's one of the reasons I pulled up all of those concepts right at the start of that one. It's just, you come full circle and you just become more of it, more of the scrupulosity and more of the, I remember this old thing of like it was some zing against the Bible. Some guy tried to follow all the Bible rules for one entire year and proved it was impossible in some sort of way because it was just all so contradictive. Well, you could do that same little study on queer theory or following any sort of all the long lists of ways you're supposed to interact with
it would fall apart instantly, though. That's the problem. The Bible thing you might have to do a year to study it and realize the contradictions, but the pride thing, see, for me, the pride thing, because I was, I was Mormon, thought it was a sin or whatever, but I don't remember thinking that gay marriage should be illegal, because Prop 8 was a big deal when I was in high school. And I think probably I discovered through that like my deepest held principle is leave me alone. Yeah. And at some point I assumed that other people would also like to be left alone. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly. Leave the gay people alone. Don't hurt them and let them do their thing.
Yeah, that was the pride argument that convinced me, was basically libertarianism. You know, stuff that doesn't affect you doesn't affect you. It's okay to let people go be themselves.
Some of my first woke breaking points that I noticed going back 15 years ago, because I'd go to the Pride Parade downtown or that Pride Festival that we have, and it was a fun, interesting time or time to go hang out. And sometimes I went with people who were gay and lesbian. Sometimes I didn't, and we just all went in fun. And it was a different time. It was a little bit more of the spirit that Flip was talking about. But on Facebook, on social media, you started seeing these snotty lists for allies. Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember any of those or saw any of them,
Yeah.
but I could probably pull up some old ones from some long ago. But like they'd each be so contradictory or so impossible. It'd be snotty lists about like, don't look at us too long, but don't ignore us. Like don't, you must acknowledge and you must not deny me, but you must not look at me. And you, I mean, that's a little bit of exaggeration, but not much of one.
No, it's not really at all, because I mean, it's borderline personality disorder.
Don't ask me about my dress, but talk to me about my dress. Like every single one, and they'd be really snooty, snotty lists. Sometimes they were being given out, of course, by people like Sam, some straight white girl from college, of course, but they were still snotty, snooty lists, and you'd get a ton of them. Almost every single Pride Month would come around, and you just wait for the lists of this is how you act at Pride Week.
Yeah, and well, because I mean, the first time I ever had a little inkling of that there was something cracking in the LGBT movement was like probably close to 20 years ago, maybe 15 years ago, when I don't even remember what we were talking about. My gay friend talked about how he has been told by other gays that he's not being gay enough, and that he is a detriment to the cause of gayness because he doesn't speak with a lisp and walk light in the loafers.
Rubin Elder asked, do you guys feel like there's a lot of biphobia in the gay community? I feel like there's a lot of people on Twitter talking about biphobia, but I don't know that I've like encountered it a ton. I feel like most of because I'm pansexual, and so I've been with lots of different people, and I don't think I've ever been met with like ew or like that's wrong, or I wouldn't want you because you're bi. Most people are just like, oh, interesting, cool.
This is a bit of a controversial take, and I know that biphobia exists, and I'm not dismissing that. But sometimes I feel like the people who are, again, this is a dependent statement, but sometimes I feel like the people who talk the loudest about biphobia, it's not even necessarily that they're experiencing it, it's that they like within themselves feel like shaky about their own sexuality, or like are struggling to like see that their own sexuality is valid, and so they'll talk a lot about biphobia because I feel like they themselves don't they haven't fully accepted themselves yet, and so it's like a lot. I feel like we all do this. We kind of
I've done it to myself.
And again, like the phobias do exist. Like that stuff does happen, but it's like we'll you can almost see it in the way that we'll all like argue with a person who isn't there about ideas that we think that people might be thinking about us, when it's like no one's actually said that to you in a lot of cases. Like I know I've done this with stuff.
Though,
sorry, stop pulling me.
Though it's obviously there is a lot of internalized biphobia, and of course there's going to be external too. I know that for instance, I have friends who have been in a gay presenting relationship, and then after a couple of years that falls apart, and the next partner is straight presenting, and then they lose a bunch of followers on Instagram because they're not gay anymore.
But is that biphobia, or is that just like people are allowed to just like unfollow people that they no longer are interested in because you know what I mean?
Which may come from a place.
No, I think it's more like if you're.
That's like when John DeLynn was describing Kwaku as being not really black.
Exactly, it is. It's like, how dare you? Well, I don't know. There's a few things there, because one thing is that
if you're married to someone of the opposite sex and you come out as bisexual, you absolutely should be sneered at.
Yes, absolutely.
Strong as a spell, I'll never tell.
Hi guys, welcome back to Exmo Lex. So I guess you probably see it in the title. This video is me coming out as bi. This is something that I've thought about talking about publicly for a long time, but I've honestly been really scared too. Now this is something that my close friends have already known about for a long time. I just haven't talked about it on my YouTube channel. There's a lot of reasons why I've been scared to talk about it publicly, most of them having to do with the reaction of other people. I know there will be people who say things like, well, you're in a straight relationship, so why does it matter if you're bi? Or even people that think that because I'm in a straight relationship, that I can't be bi. And yeah, my husband and I have been together for 10 years, and for most of that, I didn't know that I was bisexual. And
yeah, but because there's the whole college lesbian thing, all young women oh, I'm bi, and it's as you watch them grow up, they're with men.
Well, they're holding on to that now. That's something Jared and I have been talking about. I guess it's been coming up everywhere. Is they're even coming out like Kara sort of did, and Exmo Lex did. They're married, and I know a couple people around the band scene in Salt Lake. They're married. They're straight. They're coming out as bi. They're not going to act on it. They're never going to act on it. They're coming out as polyamorous. They're not going to act on that either. That's why I'm going to get to luxury beliefs.
Well, that was me. Like I came out on this as a very specific brand of pansexual.
Jared zinged them and they read it. Yeah.
No, I just said like the comment was.
We'll jump right to it, and then we'll
sure.
It's are you going to? It's like when I'm in groups arguing with fundamentalist religious people, and whenever they do like just whatever their checkmate atheist things. Or like, I don't know, just whatever it is, some dumb thing about how Noah's flood must be true. And I always say, Alhamdulillah, you've convinced me. I'm Muslim now. And for some reason, they don't believe me.
All right. Here's Jared's appearance on Zelph on the Shelf.
Jared, I've recently realized that I'm a pansexual man who is exclusively attracted to females, and I'm so ready to live my truth.
Oh, they are stuck. You trapped them. Absolutely trapped them.
They congratulated me.
No way out.
Yeah.
I'm pansexual. I'm only attracted to women.
As an AMAP non-binary person, cis can be freaking terrifying.
That one sounds like a joke too. AMAP binary person, cis.
It's all
is
a joke.
That's male at birth.
Wait, what's AMAB?
Assigned male at birth.
Oh, yeah. Duh.
I even got.
What's my religion? What is the Holy Spirit again?
I got congratulated in the comments too. Like someone's like, "Oh, well, good for you living your truth." I was like, "I just said it. Like I'm co-opting your shit. How do you not notice this?" Like,
I think we missed.
Did they just not pay attention, or did they like, or do they actually think that I can be bisexual but exclusively attracted to females?
It's Poe. They can't tell, but honestly, like how Kara and Exmo Lex came out, it's not different. It's really not.
Be attracted to females, and I'm so ready to live my truth. Good for you.
Well, there is a difference. There's a difference. The difference is Jared knows he's lying.
Yeah.
Kara doesn't know she's lying.
Yeah.
I was talking about earlier in the conversation I had yesterday with people who think. I mean, it's like the classic. Well, let me back up. People who call themselves allies. But then when you get down to it, they actually view gay, queer, trans people as like less favorable and something that ought to be prevented. And if it can't be prevented, then we can at least like tolerate. Where I'm like, no, that's not what the attitude an ally has. Like, this is cause for celebration, not
like the attitude where it's like, if
you are either with us or you are against us.
Yeah, and if you go try to be an ally for any sort of amount of time, it won't take that long before they find some sort of area where they say, "You are now out."
Just date the opposite gender. That's like, I feel like there's people in Mormonism like that.
Oh yeah, totally. Or yesterday I got in a conversation with someone where they, on a totally different note, like relating to gun control or something, they shared a meme by this person who I recognized off of Twitter, and I just messaged him and I was like, "Hey, just so you know, this person is like very homophobic," and I sent them a screenshot that was like talking about how they wanted to throw a family-friendly drag event and then arrest everybody who showed up with kids because drag is inherently evil and predatory.
I still think they're just scared of the drag queens getting kids into reading. I can't see it any other way.
No,
so I messaged the person and I was like, "Hey, just so you know."
So this kind of is related, but the Burger King buns thing. You can get the Pride Burger King.
I'll clip it. It's on the screen right now. Imagine.
And I mentioned that to a friend of mine, like, because he got off the internet more or less. Good for him. So he's not keeping up abreast of everything. And I mentioned that because I was just having this conversation about the whole, like, I think Pride is getting away from the things that I think it's about. And bear in mind, like, this guy is we won't go into details, but he's sexually non-conforming in many ways. He's hardly a prude. He's a practicing Buddhist atheist. And I mentioned that to him and he just went, "Oh, no." And he said, if a bar did that, that's fine. Burger King is a family restaurant. Like, really, am I supposed to explain to my kid the details of homosexual penetrative sex so that they understand what the burger means?
Absolutely. I would bet the majority of gay people are on the side of not doing that in front of kids. The majority.
That
And it
reminds me,
like-
I was watching Bar Rescue the other day, and there's this episode where they go to this guy who, it's not just a bar, but it's like a family restaurant. And everyone, including, John Taffer, the guy who's trying to flip the bar, is telling him, look, you have this drink and you named it Pussy Juice. And this is a family restaurant. Don't do, if you were just a bar, that'd be kind of funny for your trashy locals or whatever. But it's not, there's kids here. And so she's doing this with the whole drag. Oh, drag is inherently sexual and terrible and evil. It's like, no, I don't think buttholes are inherently evil, but I don't want buttholes just open around my kid.
No, because that's the thing, is that, I mean, it's not a firm distinction. There's the fuzzy areas everywhere here, but the sexuality is exactly what distinguishes drag performance from just transvestites. That's the key difference. If it is just a guy in a dress, that's just a guy in a dress. That's a different thing. Drag performances are sexual. Just go to one.
I've never seen one that isn't sexual.
I have clips and pics. I have clips and pics of the stuff they brush off here.
I'm not saying there's anything bad with things being sexualized. Just when there's children involved, then it becomes bad.
You can see the children, the babies, the parents who are presumably enjoying this performance and brought their kids to this because. Why?
The kids were asking them, Daddy, can I please go and watch a drag show? No,
yeah,
of course they weren't.
This is in Dallas as well, which the fact that this took place in Texas shocked a lot of people, certainly shocked me.
Purple state, man.
I know you've got these little blue dots in the city, so they're just the cancer of California.
This is what happens when you become a purple state, just saying.
And I'm really hoping that the Texans really take action and trying to reaffirm themselves as somewhere that's actually sane. Because if we go to the next one, of course, this continues, and there's more footage of this totally wholesome Wendy's type. That's in front of a kid there. The kid presumably wondering why the hell the parents brought them here, with a sign behind saying it's not going to lick itself.
Yeah.
Whilst the individual dances around in a square dance formation, I'm sure. And you can see Matt Walsh responding to this saying every adult in the room should spend the rest of their lives in solitary confinement.
A bit harsh, but fair.
Well, Texas law is Texas law. So
yeah.
We go to the next one. We also have the other images that came out of this. This is the worst one, frankly.
Yeah. I think, just before we go on, I think that we can categorically state that in all times and in all places, it is wrong for a prepubescent child to put money into a stripper's panties. Can we say?
And I enjoyed it. So here's my drag story, is that there was just one day I was with a friend and she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm nothing. She's like, do you want to go to a drag show tonight? I'm like, sure, never been to one. And I went and I watched the whole thing, and I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because it was funny. There was, lots of humor. They had a whole theme. And also some of the performers were really excellent. And I appreciate performance. It's that the work that goes, not just the costuming and the makeup and all of that, but the acting, that, actually just the actual performance of doing the act. And I was like, some of the performers, I was like, wow, this is incredible. I'm being taken away and onto this journey with this person on this little trip. Now, some of the performers were terrible, and it's just a man in a dress doing bad karaoke. But there is that distinction there. But that's what a drag show is. Whereas Eddie Izzard is a man who dresses as a woman.
It's cross-dressing.
Is not doing drag.
That's what I was talking about yesterday. Dane Edna wasn't too bad, or
Dame Edna
she goes
was not
mentioning
doing drag.
She goes mentioning European things, and even Kids in the Hall, that was cross-dressing. That wasn't drag.
Yeah, exactly. And and these people are trying to totally smear that distinction away.
There's a story, right? And it's from the future. I'm reaching out to the future. I'm calling this, and because the list of things that they call not inherently sexual is growing into absurdity. Yeah. And there's going to be a teacher at some point in the next couple of years that has just a giant dildo,
dude,
just hanging from the ceiling, and we're going to have
that's already happened. Some of those people reading had dildos hanging off.
Oh damn!
I can clip it in. Some of those New York City libraries reading to kids had a dildo hanging off.
I'm saying a teacher, and then we're going to have an argument. We're going to actually have to argue whether or not sex toys are inherently sexual.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I think
I forgot to do the preamble. We're supposed to preamble nowadays because everybody's a dipshit. But adult time being adults, having adult fun time, we are all for it. Knock yourselves out.
Yeah, nobody should again, because like I like a good drag performance. That's the thing I learned when I went to my first drag show, is that when this is done well, I will watch because I like comedy and I like a good performance. But that's the other thing. I was talking to a gay friend, which is like, is, you know, just in my mind, but the way I see it, the distinction between drag and transgender is that the drag performer knows they're performing, and so does the audience, and everybody is in on it.
Well, there's always a part of drag. Drag almost always has people throwing dollars and holding up dollars. I mean, there's something inherently strippery about that. I mean, you don't hold up dollars and throw dollars at any other show than a stripper show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is there another type of thing that's done at? I mean,
piano dueling. I've seen that at piano dueling and strip clubs. There you go. And Christian meetings. You put the money in the plate.
See, you've come up with the exact false equivalence that they'll put with.
Church, piano dueling. I guess piano dueling is the only pure thing.
There's that great H.L. Mencken quote where he says Puritanism is the haunting thought that someone somewhere is enjoying themselves. And I feel like if you were around now to view this type of Puritanism that's happening, he would say, well, this type of Puritanism is the haunting fear that someone somewhere doesn't want to do the thing that you want to do.
Yeah, that's true.
And they were like, well, they do have a point. And I was like, what's the point? Like, well, drag shouldn't be with kids. And I was like, why? And they're like, well, it's inherently sexual and opens the door up for predatory behavior. And I was like,
it does, and it does.
Anyone who grew up in the UK watching Panto, which is all drag. Like Panto is
just cross-dressing.
Why don't we have stripper reading hour? Why don't we just do stripper reading hour if it's fine?
Well, plus you could make the argument to them that strip clubs are not inherently sexual, and they would probably if they didn't think you were trying to fuck them over, you could probably make that argument to them and be like, yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. It's going to a strip club isn't inherently sexual.
Yeah, you can just have a drink and that's it. But of course, nobody does that.
Made some point about how drag is inherently sexual. It's like, do you think the drag queens reading to kids are making the same sexual jokes that they'd make at a bar? Obviously.
Yes, we've seen it. The problem with all this stuff is we've seen it. We see them.
This is the one that wasn't wearing panties.
Why don't we have? If we just have a stripper in pasties, hanging off of a stripper pole while reading Dr. Seuss, what's sexual about that?
Boobs aren't inherently sexual, but I don't want a topless woman reading to kids.
I was like, drag.
Well, the other thing here that I got to point out also is that because in principle, I totally believe that you could have a perfectly reasonable, uncontroversial, non-sexualized drag kid reading hour.
They never could do it.
The part that
Eddie Izzard could do it.
Yeah, but the part that they're leaving off, that they're all pretending we don't know about, is the specific queer agenda, and I mean queer theory agenda, that's behind all this.
Why you see at the so-called pride parades, literally fetishists out in their fetish gear and their leathers and their chaps and their little weird outfits, hanging out and talking to kids. And this is why this has been this huge argument for a few years. This is the beast that got unleashed by Rubin and her associates in queer theory. Now, we're not going to give her all the credit. Judith Butler did a ton to develop queer theory, as did Eve Sedgwick did a lot to develop queer theory, her so-called epistemology of the closet, which we should probably go through at some point, as did people like Jack/Judith Halberstam. We got a trans person involved there. There's another one, Halperin, that did a lot. I can't think of Halperin's first name. It's probably Jack/Judith also, or something like that. So anyway, we pick up here in the middle of the paper, sexual transformation. Just to kind of remind you where we left off, she was just going through kind of all of this stuff about how basically different how there have been different regimes of control, kind of doing a Foucauldian critical genealogy of sex and sexuality. For psychology, it's so remember this paragraph here. She said this notion of a single ideal sexuality characterizes most systems of thought about sex. For religion, the ideal is procreative marriage. For psychology, it's mature heterosexuality. Although its content varies, the format of a single sexual standard is continually reconstituted within other rhetorical frameworks, including feminism and socialism. It is just as objectionable to insist that everyone should be lesbian, non-monogamous, or kinky as to believe that everyone should be heterosexual, married, or vanilla, though the latter set of opinions are backed by considerably more coercive power than the former. So you hear that we left off in this kind of critical constructivist, explicitly critical constructivist. She says she's using a critical approach and social constructivism from Foucault. So you hear that, the power dynamic, there's your critical side, and the constructivism that we really can't make any real determinations about what is appropriate sex, and this is kind of arbitrarily enforced on people with lots of punishment if you're on the wrong side and lots of leeway if you're on the right side, which I said last time is like a repressive tolerance.
Like they're pretending like we don't know that this isn't just organically, I happen to be a drag queen. I also happen to be very into literacy. I put the two things together in an appropriate way. We're not talking about that. We're talking about people deliberately trying to sexualize children.
There is a gaslight in this. They are you can watch any one of the things. Like I got clips here, but beyond that, there's a million clips online. People have all probably already seen them, and it's just a lie that they're not trying to pull something off to inculcate those kids into something.
Yeah, because that thing's like, if it was what they're saying it is, like, oh, it's just somebody going about my day, like that would be fine. Okay, whatever. But we know that's not what this is.
Dress up, like it's like saying Halloween is inherently sexual.
It's like saying Punch and Judy is inherently sexual. There's just like so many.
No, it's
things
not.
Like
It's not inherently sexual, but I could bring you some Halloween costumes that you shouldn't be doing in front of kids.
And I'm sure we can search the internet for the Rule 42 of Punch and Judy.
Yeah.
Where we like do caricatures and exaggerate like things.
And it's like, sure, there's always a spectrum of like, if you have a family-friendly Halloween event, it means that it's family-friendly and everyone's gonna be dressed up. And if you have a family-friendly drag event, it means it's gonna be family-friendly.
No, it does not.
It's like having a family-friendly strip event.
What I'm saying is that this person in question that you're arguing with definitely doesn't get invited to a lot of fun brunches.
Absolutely
not. He
not.
has the energy of someone who hasn't gone to brunch in a while, if you know what I mean.
But he is fully enlightened and incapable.
I like that. I like that little dig. I like that little dig about like, well, you know, people who disagree with me on this, well, they're not popular. They don't really have friends.
I've never been to a wild thing in my life.
No.
I completely disagree with you guys, and I bet you I've been in more wild situations than you guys ever have.
For having done
ayahuasca. Okay, an interesting point that someone made I wanted to read out. Ali says, as a 15-year-old bi girl, I think that I would definitely consider myself an ally before I started questioning the Mormon religion and allowing myself to be who I actually am. And like this is kind of the thing I do. This is why I think sometimes it's like, let's not be too hard on people, because
so this is stuff where they just kind of come down on allies, and you can't be an ally in the church. I'll jump past that. We know that they think that.
Awesome. So you have to kind of tune into yourself enough to know what is harming you.
Actually, wait. Do we know that? Has John Larson told that 15-year-old bi Mormon girl that she needs to leave her family? And
they basically. I think they basically open face say that. They say nobody can stay in the church and be an ally. I think
John Larson has that insane rant. I thought you guys.
You can't even work at BYU.
Yeah, he's saying quit your job or you're homophobic.
Yeah, sacrifice your 401k because you have blood on your hands.
Living with your parents as you've embraced your queerness more. Do you feel like there's been an increase in tolerance?
Well, that's kind of. I don't know that I have much in the way of advice. Just to rant my angst, is like so much of what's difficult with religious parents and matters of identity is that you like want so badly for them to just like see you as you are and to appreciate your complexity, and
I don't. I don't want my parents to know about my sexuality at all.
Yeah, that's so weird.
That's the funny thing is that like I don't know. I'm putting myself in Tanner's dad's shoes, and I'm like, look, okay, Dad, I like to suck dicks too. And I'm like, okay, don't tell me about it. That's fine. But do you have to dress like a fucking idiot? You can clip that out if you want.
No.
Yeah.
That's probably a little mean.
Oh, unless you want it out.
I don't care. I'm a dick.
I saw Michael Malice this week, and he said the way you got to talk about feminists is you got to reverse the gender insults. So you got to call them dickheads.
No, I do that shit all the time. I call women at work. I call them assholes the same way I call dudes assholes, and they get real confused.
You, regardless, even if you have weird fucked up ideas about me or people like me.
Yeah, because when I'm doing really well, even when my parents have the most fucked up views, I'm able to just be like, well, you're just the product of your conditioning, and I see you beyond your beliefs because you didn't choose to have those beliefs. You were just like a victim of the culture and a victim of everything you've ever experienced, and like.
And determinism.
But you can't always do that. You don't always have the bandwidth.
Yeah, someday.
She's always got to work in her determinism, but only after having judged. The determinism comes after having judged.
It's just a nihilistic spiral.
Yeah, no, like, how do you know that your belief about conditioning isn't a product of your conditioning? Ooh, I just destroyed your world.
You're just like, oh my god, we've been fascism is rearing its ugly head again, and we're all going down with it.
A tough fascism week.
Yeah.
We all have them.
Yeah,
this is where we learned that these people don't know what fascism means.
They just dropped it in. They just dropped it in. There's no other context around that.
Yeah.
Like, oh my gosh, fascism.
That word means something. It's not what
we
you
all
think it
know
is.
what it means. Obviously, we're not going to go over it.
Fascism is when your dad doesn't want to hear about the dicks you suck.
That's Flip, you summed it up. You really did sum it up. You summed it up. Oh my gosh, this is fascism.
There's a bunch of these people who grew up in purity culture who seem to be.
They're talking about mom talk, and have you heard about mom talk, Flip?
Mom talk?
There's all these TikTok Mormon women who they were showing off all their Mormon stuff, and then the scandal came out that they had all gotten swingery with each other.
Yeah, like 2 of them are getting divorced. And...
Yeah.
Oh, the internet destroys lives, everybody.
It is pretty funny, and they were insufferable. Insufferable, kind of more like all living in McMansion type little. Mormon women making these TikTok videos and getting popular off of them, like with their babies and doing dances and stuff like that. And then it all just blew up in scandal that they were all swinging with each other, and they call it light swinging.
Soft swinging.
soft swinging here.
I listened to the girl talk about that. She said like that her definition of that was basically that like, yeah, they can bang each other, but like they all got to be in the same room. Like that was their rule. And her and one other dude went and banged in another room.
Not in front of each other. So
that's
it
what
broke
caused
the rules.
it to. If that distinction, that tiny little distinction, is the difference between you and absolute rules, it kind of signals to me that maybe your lifestyle is not desirable.
Yeah,
not ideal.
Oh, this is one of those things that I love how Jordan Peterson talks about it, because it really is like, I think he hits the nail on the head. Because when somebody asks him about polyamory or whatever, and like he won't say good, bad. He won't say moral, amoral. He won't say do it, don't do it. He says
optimal,
it's a poor long-term strategy for happiness.
Yeah.
I see that.
There's more things that fall apart, and that's what I'm going to pull up Rob Henderson talking about the luxury belief end of it, because he actually gets into statistics about how that messes up. It causes a world where there are more single mothers. You cause a world where there are less men. Actually, if there's more polyamory, you get that situation that you have in the Middle East where it's the Pareto distribution. More women go to more high-powered men. You guys hate your capitalism and all the money goes to the top. Well, I hate to break it to you, but with the materialism of women and whatnot, if you get that sort of thing, all those TikTok moms will all get into swinging and going towards high-power, high-money men there's fewer distributed of them. And they won't spread out. This is why Jordan Peterson got in trouble for mentioning enforced monogamy for the New York Times, which he was not saying you actually enforce it, you spazzes. He was saying that a culture that enforces that disperses the men and women better among more people, and you get a more stable society for that. If you get into a culture where you have more polyamory, all the women go up towards the high-powered men, and we're seeing that happen right now in Tinder and all that stuff. They say like 4% of guys get swiped right on. 4% how many do, and it's completely opposite of the women. And so like a few select guys who can not actually commit can have all the poon in the world, and there's consequences. There's major societal consequences and stuff. I'll let Rob Henderson get into it later, but if we even have time for it.
But like, because I believe it's possible. Like I don't think it's impossible that there exists healthy, long-term, stable polyamorous relationships. I have never seen or heard of them.
Neither have I. And you and I, Flip, we've even called out before, seeing some people start and go down that path, because now that we watch almost everybody who leaves Mormonism, just one by one, they all say, I'll cut in the Tobias thing right here. Maybe it'll work for us type thing. They try it, and it blows up in their freaking faces every single time. And I've watched it 100 times.
So Lindsay and Tobias finally took a hard look at their relationship.
You know, Lindsay, as a therapist, I have advised a number of couples to explore an open relationship where the couple remains emotionally committed, but free to explore extramarital encounters.
Well, did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
Well, we could give it a shot.
Great. We'll hammer out the details later. Right now, we've got a daughter to tell. Maybe we're having a family meeting.
But it's a luxury belief. One of the reasons that Henderson will call it a luxury belief is because usually you can only start getting into that stuff when you've gotten to a certain level of leisure time and thinkiness and time to sit around navel gazing, that you guys decide to start doing that, and you can afford a divorce, and you can afford a losing your kids, and you can, it becomes a luxury belief.
I'm not surprised that a bunch of these people who grew up in purity culture, who seem to be kind of emotionally mature, got themselves into a non-monogamous situation, weren't equipped to deal with the feelings that would come up. I think one of their rules that they had,
the guy with fishnet sleeves and the porn stash and earrings seems really emotionally mature. He just rips maturity.
Yeah.
A rule you can set in non-monogamy that's not realistic.
So they're talking about them, and so then they get into this thing about their true answers. They should embrace the polyamory
box. It can create dysfunction, because then you become so focused on keeping it within that box that you don't allow it to live and breathe and move the way that it needs to. And so then it can just sort of like fester and like get infected, and I don't know, this metaphor is spinning out, but like there's something to be said for like drawing on polyamorous teachings, whatever you want to call them. There's a really good TED talk called Monogamish by Esther Perel. For those of you who are not on the Esther Perel train yet,
she's great.
Highly recommend it.
Do you know who Esther Perel is? She is Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith's life coach, who life coached them into their polyamory stuff. And she sits there at that red table with them and having those stupid talks with Jada, just constly rips the balls off of Will and live in front of millions of
live in
people.
front of everyone, saying, hey, I banged our son's friend.
Yeah, she's one of the major pushers. It's been probably 20 years now of people going into polyamory.
I just thought, apparently she coined the phrase erotic intelligence, paging Dr. Orwell.
Emotional intelligence is already an annoying enough phrase.
And it reminded me of things I've read in various forums or heard, in TikToks or whatever, that essentially like coming out of the closet as something different than the scripted norm is really the opening of a door into a hallway of other doors with other constructs that ultimately can get shed, like monogamy, all that stuff, gender identity. And this is why I think so much of the political focus is on gay and trans people, because they know that it's sort of the hole in the dike that's holding this monolithic culture in place. That like, if you're like, oh, I actually don't have to live by the script, you kind of realize, oh, this is all just constructed, scripted stuff that doesn't really reflect reality.
Gayle Rubin's writing this in 1984. Let's not lose Gayle Rubin here. And by the 1990s, queerness became almost untethered from homosexual sex practices. And instead, what did I say, by the way, about what queerness is? In queer theory, queer Marxism. I said, let me remind you before I finish the sentence, I said that queer theory is a Marxist theory where there's a special kind of property called normalcy. And what has to be done is that, in keeping with the Communist Manifesto, Chapter 2 and elsewhere, as Marx said, communism can be summarized in a single sentence: abolition of private property. In other words, in this case, queer theory can be, or queer Marxism can be summarized in a single sentence: abolition of the concept of normal. Abolition of the normal. Queerness.
It doesn't reflect true human nature because, okay, this is a good point to talk about fucking
Codian thing that they all barely even understand that they're gobbling down. They're talking about this constructs and stuff. But a couple times he goes off on Mar and this, saying that just Mar has boomer opinions for saying that it's a cultural fad. And I'm sorry.
Also, isn't that what's it called? Ageism? Layers and layers of irony.
But people get the most angry and fight the hardest when people break arbitrary rules that they themselves hold as gospel. Because
Arbitrary.
it's kind of like how people who got pregnant.
I've watched enough Vosh to really hate that word.
Arbitrary, yeah. I mean, it's also the Foucauldian thing that they all barely even understand that they're gobbling down. They're talking about this constructs and stuff. But a couple times he goes off on Mar and this, saying that just Mar has boomer opinions for saying that it's a cultural fad. And I'm sorry.
Also, isn't that what's it called? Ageism? Isn't that one of the things we're not supposed to do? Because those old people, they all think like boomers.
I think in 2017 we have a giant increase in the number of girls who are now saying that they're trans. Now, it could well be that they're right, or it could well be that it's a fad, it's a thing. My daughter went to a summer camp, a regular summer camp, and most of the girls in her bunk, these are 11 and 12-year-old girls. They've had no sexual experience. Most of them say they're trans, gay, non-binary. They don't even know yet, I think. But it's, there's a lot of social pressure to be that way. All right. Actually, I don't want to opine on the facts of it. What I want to opine on is, okay, we have a big change. It could be that the right thing to do is to be supportive and to give them gender-affirming care and hormones. Maybe that's the right thing. Maybe it's not. Wouldn't it be great if we could actually talk about it? That would be a great thing because it's an empirical question. But we can't talk about it because anybody who says anybody who says this is not real will be utterly destroyed. Now,
but I hate to break it to you, they get mad at Abigail Schreier or whatever, but I'm sorry, there is major cultural fad going on in this. There is social contagion going on. I'm sorry, there just is. Just like there always has been, just like social contagion was there. She talks about in that other clip that we showed before you got there, Flip, where she said people can jump onto victim things. She was talking about the social contagion of anorexia, and that's one of the first ones that has happened to. It's like a social contagion of becoming a goth kid, and then there's absolutely major amounts of social contagion going in it from all these corporate people that you guys throw a stink about the corporate people getting into this or pushing.
And what I want to talk to you about today are two things: behavioral contagions and causality. And so what I do is I mine massive social network data to understand how behavioral contagions spread in human social networks, how peers influence one another to do things like quit smoking or buy a certain product or vote for a different political candidate. And so Slate ran an article that was titled "Everything is Contagious." Okay, it's not just about obesity. Apparently happiness is contagious, and product adoption is contagious, and cooperation is contagious, and loneliness is contagious. But it's also not just about birds of a feather. There are many alternative explanations that can explain these correlations, like friends might be exposed to the same external stimuli or have a greater probability.
Well, I guess I could jump to him complaining about the corporate people. Let's listen to his weirdness that he announces here.
Like when you're exploring, new sides of your sexuality, it's also new. I feel like you need more time to process things that are happening. Like I really relate to that. It's like not because you're less into that gender or whatever, but it's just like when experiences are new, it's a different processing speed, and it's not just like fitting into the same script. Sorry, I'm just repeating myself.
No, I feel that I have dealt with a lot of internalized biphobia, panphobia, whatever it is, homophobia even. And I mean, part of it too, I remember being terrified because it's I'm not ready to have anal sex. And it's that's literally not the expectation. And the more I've dated around in the gay community, the more I'm oh, that's even not even the main thing these days. It can be if you're into it, but I don't know.
This phobia talk, though, there's a thing going on here. Because, there's still conservative Christians and some boomers that might just not like you because of your sexuality. But I got news for you. My generation, Chris, Jared, all of the younger people, most conservatives that I know, they have no problem with your lifestyle choices whatsoever.
Bill
Our
Maher
issue
too.
is with your activism. That's what we don't like. We don't like your authoritarianism. We don't like your bigotry. That's what we don't like. I do not care what you do with your dick. I don't care about your damn mustache or your, whatever. Like, I just don't fucking care. And that's the thing that makes me crazy is I can't convince these people. I don't care about your sexuality. I only care about your shitty activistic religion. That's what I don't like. And that's what people are resisting. All this pushback you're getting isn't because of how you look or how you dress or your shitty mustache. People had those 20 years ago. Everybody was okay with it. We don't like your activism.
Preach.
All right.
Now's the time to go get your little drink. I was
I'll go get a drink.
Pride, and I've been feeling angsty generally, and I realize it's my problem. And I love to see all the solidarity and the community spirit. But it was a little discouraging, like going to the Pride Parade and being like, oh, 70% of these things are just corporations who aren't really celebrating queer identity outside of their marketability. It's like, oh, we've created people that we're supporting a group that we can profit from and not contribute to or celebrate in any meaningful way. And that was kind of, it just rubbed me the wrong way. Or like the main thing that we're going to do to celebrate our queerness is like, it's all centered around like consumerism. And I don't know, it's tough.
Yeah.
But then also really grateful that there is that representation and that like ContraPoints said that you brought up earlier.
Yeah, go to Burning Man, dude. I don't know what the fuck do you want?
Yeah, it
Well,
always.
Apparently, Burning Man has been corporatized too. That's the word I get from the burners is that even the old burners are annoyed that Burning Man has just become corporatized.
It always goes to Zizek in a second. And the reason I say Zizek is because it's always like, oh, we're hardcore. Oh, there's all this corporatism. There's all, we'll just embrace. Okay, it's fine. That's Zizek to me. But he puts it in his big, stupid theoretical terms. And that's really all it all is. Like, oh, this is all plastic. And we realize it's all plastic, but it's good. Well, I guess we'll just go with it. We'll go with it. Oh, I lament it, but it's good. We'll go with it.
But kind of to tie back into my little rant, because this is the part where the reason I rant and the reason I get angry is that because like I am actually into diversity in a way that these people can't imagine, in that like being into differences it's just part of me. It's almost a compulsion, like I'm so into encountering and talking to and understanding different kinds of people. And like in principle, I would love to talk to you about your experience as pansexual, whatever, but on a human to human level. But I can't, because I can't get past your political religion to actually get to the human being inside of you. I have to fight through all of your bullshit, and it's just not worth it to me. So I just don't care.
Yeah. It's gonna accumulate to that because it's honestly like the last thing he says. We'll get to it.
It's a question of like, oh, how we're seeing this exponential rise in people identifying as some shade of queer or trans, and it's like, oh, well, what has happened? It's just because it's trendy and the kids just love irking their parents, and it's like, or
yes and yes,
because of the internet and the ability to communicate with people like us. People
not or
also yes,
it's and it's not
and
or
yes and yes.
Yeah.
This coming generation of rebels is going to be really confusing to anybody who grew up before, because I'm already seeing things like there's this woman at work. She's in her mid to late 40s, and she's ex-Mormon, and talking about how like one of her sons was being like his moment of rebellion was serving a mission, and another one of her sons is like, oh, he's like 20 years old and he's already talking about like how he's excited to get married and have
there's
kids
that
and stuff.
counter.
Like, why don't you go fool around with girls or something like that?
That counter rebellion, the neo-reactionary rebellion by the Zoomers.
I saw this great like advice. It was a screenshot from this advice page on Facebook of this woman saying, "What do we do? Our daughter has been lying to us about where she's going, and it turns out she's been going to pro-life rally."
Well, they even have it in that movie Knives Out. Ryan Johnson, but the young kid in it is rebelling by becoming a young Ben Shapiro around the whole family, and stuff. It is, well, I mean, as Paul Joseph Watson says, is they are the counterculture now. So
I remember seeing the rainbow flag and being like, I like that better than the American flag.
and Jared got his zing in right around there, and now we'll go to the
romance was so central. And someone made this point in like a YouTube commentary video recently, and I thought that's really true. It's weird how much like children's content focuses on romance. Like not that there's anything wrong with like children dating and stuff, but it's like we haven't even figured out how to not extend like our obsession with romance and like monogamous relationships and finding the one to children. So it's like there'll be these like kids movies with like 11-year-olds and they're sharing like such adult kisses, like certain Disney Channel movies and stuff. I'm having a really bad bang day, I'm realizing, and I just wish I could get
it's called female behavior. Disney is marketing directly to young girls. Young girls are into romance.
But that's just because of the social conditioning.
Oh, that's right. She got conditioned into it.
Checkmate.
In the DMs the other day with that person who was saying that like drag is inherently grooming children, and I'm like, you are perfectly content with straight analogous things all the time. Like he showed me a video from like PragerU, Christian think tank, that was like
the Jewish
Prager is
Christian
Jewish, you jackass.
Queen
He's a
doing
fucking Orthodox
splits,
Jew.
and then, like, paused and was like, can you believe it? Dancing like a stripper in front of children.
The
And
splits!
I'm like,
all my dancer friends could do the splits at like 5. It wasn't anything. God, that's
Did we hand out dollars to them?
Yeah. Wait, were they doing splits in the Speedo with their ass facing up?
Now we're gonna pull up the receipts on that stuff.
Oh god, this is all. It's funny to watch them because you were talking about their little disclaimers they always have to do, and it's funny because the disclaimer, it's always this whole video about them applying their own weird morality to something, but the disclaimer is always everything is permitted. Like, well, we know that everything is permitted. Everything's okay. There's nothing wrong with, kids dating or whatever. But anyway, we hate this pushing of romance in kids. Shit. I don't know.
This is for sure the one they were talking about, although I have another. But
also,
they're grabbing dollars. They're
answer.
passing out dollars to a little kid.
But to answer Sam and whatever his name is, Kevin, I don't know his name. I just made that up. But because they're like, oh, you're actually fine with this, with everything else. Like, I got to tell you, no. Since I was a kid, I have thought that cheerleaders is weird. Like, especially in a lot of circumstances. Like why do we have young girls dressed like this, dancing in this, like, so like right there, like, no, I've always thought that was a little strange.
Well, this is
point to
a middle school, and it's an adult male.
Yeah, exactly. But see, this is a strip show with no nudity. This is a strip show minus nudity. That's it.
That's just cheerleaders.
And it's barely minus nudity.
Like cheerleaders is a like maybe one step derived from strip show minus nudity, but yeah.
Well, one of the easier one to point to is like the dance moms, the toddlers in tiara, the beauty pageants, because they always that was their big thing when they're like, oh, you don't want kids doing drag. When the whole Desmond is Amazing thing was blowing up, they'd always say, but you're totally fine with beauty pageants. No, I'm not.
No, we're not. We think
Why
it's
do you
creepy and
think I'm
weird.
fine with this? Like, why weren't you guys yelling about this? We're not talking about it right now. If you talk about it with me, if you talk about it with even like my conservative parents, it will be like, no, we do not like what they're doing in beauty pageants.
Yeah, no, it seems so many to be a pretty narrow fan base for that stuff.
Yeah. They say it's homophobic, but like I try to imagine the scenario of a cis person doing it. Like where is the female adult teacher doing the strip show at the middle school? Where was that? I've never seen that. I've never seen, hey, you adult teacher who actually at home on your own free time does some stripping. How about you come share that stripping at our next assembly a little bit? That's not happening.
I'm just sharing my talents.
Let's see, and then I got a couple pictures. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one.
Is that
twerk? Half of them will call them like twerkers, like light twerkers type stuff like that. That'll be their titles and their names and stuff like that.
Sacro Chappelle?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, and the thing is, like, that's just what I looked up right before this. People have been showing this stuff for a year now. You can.
When that one, the one on the right where the girl was putting the dollar bill, that wasn't even drag. That was burlesque.
Yeah, it's straight up
and it's
stripping,
funny
and they're putting dollars in their G-strings and stuff like that. Like,
yeah,
come
well,
on.
I saw somebody trying to say that burlesque isn't inherently sexual.
You know, I was actually thinking this the other day, just to be super misogynistic and patriarchal, because I was thinking about like, well, what's the difference between burlesque and drag? And I realized I'm way more impressed with drag because it takes actual work. Because if you're already a sexy girl, you just take your clothes off and you win. Right?
Nobody's commenting on your dancing skills.
In drag,
exactly.
you have to be able to do the
It's like,
splits.
yeah.
You don't have to do the splits.
Yeah, for men to do what women just do naturally, that takes actual
Like
work, talent,
everything,
and
man,
skill.
you actually have to work at it.
Heteronormativity and compulsive heterosexuality.
Compulsive heterosexuality.
I don't know, probably like on TikTok or something a couple of years ago. But real issue, we're definitely living in that society. And it's interesting. It's interesting coming like brushing up against that, having like even before having those words to say that, like compet, just experiencing that and realizing like, oh yeah, I totally live in a world where this is just set up as like the default and people are not comfortable with
Do you not
breaking
understand why it might be the
Weird. We live in a
default?
world with so many fake constructs that people are just holding to as absolute reality.
It's fake constructs. Monogamy is a
fake-
fake construct.
He's talking about heterosexuality right now.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Fascism.
That's what you missed it. It's fascism.
Yeah.
It's fascism.
Weird. We live in a world of so many fake constructs that people are just holding to as absolute reality. It's a bit terrifying. Fascism. I'm feeling so angsty about it.
Yeah, we know.
Oh my god. No, like, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, because fascism has become to mean, like, worldly, you know, or the culture. Like, it's just a word you throw out that is the umbrella term for all of the things that make you uncomfortable because it causes you to feel cognitive dissonance in your worldview. That's all that is.
Yep.
Fascism, compulsive heterosexuality. I've actually never heard that term before. He taught me
They
something.
call it
compulsive
monogamy. They start calling it toxic monogamy.
Oh yeah, but
Toxic
that's
monogamy
like
is one of my
he's
new
talking
favorite
about
things.
this like I can't believe we're compulsively heterosexual. And I'm like, do you really? And he keeps calling it a construct. I'm like, you really don't even for like a second understand why maybe heterosexuality is a default. That's not just, and calling it the default isn't a dig on homosexuality. It's
not.
There's
Yeah,
nothing
Yeah, no,
wrong
it's like,
with it.
this is one of those dirty, nasty tricks that they've pulled. Because if you just say, like, well, heterosexuality is normal. Oh, no, normal. That's one of those naughty no words where it's like, no, it just explains how the human species procreates. Like,
having two arms is normal,
unless-
but having one arm is not immoral because of
yeah, exactly. Unless most people engage in heterosexual sex, there is no human species. Like,
yeah.
It's adorn the ethical slut more than
So
two.
let's get to the grand finale of this.
I'm sure you could list a bunch of books. I think that it is important though to just like, dare I say it, be reading and just like be consuming like wisdom from people who have gone through the things that you're going through. And like
I did. That's why I know better than you.
No, but listen, there's a paradox in talking about old wisdom.
Get wisdom from our elders because a lot of our elders are like racist and homophobic.
Oh, this reminds me, like, my sisters gave my dad shit because he named his dog after Rudyard Kipling, his favorite poet. Just
white man's burden. Man.
Died in the AIDS
you don't want no wisdom,
All of our good elders died in the
really
AIDS crisis.
Like, books are a great way to get like deep learning, and they do allow for a lot of like self-reflection. And I've learned so much about myself through reading like nonfiction and fiction. But I really am all about like committing to reading. It's like, I don't know if that's a unpopular message. It's
I see. This is that scrupulosity thing. Like,
one of my beefs with
pride. I'm fortunate in that I'm like autistically nerdy and obsessive about stuff. So like I don't worry about that I'm not reading enough and that I'm not, like going outside of my my areas of interest.
I need to
enough
do it less.
It's in my
yeah. Like, we were talking about that last time. We were talking about how I'm always up to my eyeballs in shit that I don't believe and don't like. So I have to actually go out of my way to read.
I have all these
that
clips
I
because
agree
I had all these clips because I had to sit here and tough it through all their stuff, and I tough it through listening to all the people I disagree with.
And I have a few beefs with the Pride Center specifically. Don't have to go into that right now. And someone was like, for all their faults, at least we have a place where queer youth
Zizek,
experience
Zizek,
queer
Zizek.
communal joy with other people. And I was like, totally. My first time at the Pride Center, I was like, this is so great, and just nothing but gratitude. You know, as things have become a little bit more complex, my ideas have shifted a little bit. But ultimately, a resource that I would love to say, I wish there were more spaces like that where youth can experience communal queer identity that wasn't, again, it's not centered, you don't have to pay to get in, it's not centered around you, just your ability to spend money at a location, which is really where I feel a lot of angst is. Like, I really feel like queerdom is revolutionary, and that could be like a revolutionary way of building alternative communities to capitalism.
There it is.
There it is. There it is. You just did it. Because like I was before he said that, I wanted to interrupt him and say,
but yeah, I wish there was more.
You can have the world you're looking for. You can have the world you're looking for, where people who feel different can find a place and feel safe. But you took it away just now by declaring that you are engaged in a revolution
of oppression. In other words, we're going to look at sex in a Marxist way because we need new radical politics of sex, and that's why we're thinking sex. That's what this paper is about. Queer theory is queer Marxism. Gayle Rubin, 1984. Thank you. The system of sexual oppression cuts across other modes of social inequality. You feel the rumblings of intersectionality coming into play, sorting out individuals and groups according to its own intrinsic dynamics. It is not reducible to or understandable in terms of class, race, ethnicity, or gender. Intersectionality is poking over the wall.
You just undermined your entire
leads towards that, and it's the way to dismantle capitalism. It's a way to dismantle monogamy. Wait a minute, everything that all the people saying, "Hey, watch out for this stuff," have been saying, and people have been screaming, "Nah," you know, you just
well, that's what you just said it. If a gay kid says, "I need a place to go talk about my feelings about sexuality," but instead what they get is, "You need to dismantle capitalism." Like, you just took away their space. You just took it from them and hijacked it and made them into a little tool for your power grab.
So, talking luxury beliefs, Rob Henderson here.
It's like, okay, there are things deep inside you that have been there for a long time, that act in certain ways that might be predictable. And I think what people usually say regarding that is that you don't want to fall into the naturalistic fallacy to say that if you have certain tendencies as a human or certain patterns, you don't want to say, okay, this is how it has to be.
Deny your feelings.
They talk so much about nuance and having new nuance, and then we got to deconstruct all this stuff for having nuances. The real nuance is figure out that you actually are in human nature evolved bodies, and the default of those evolved bodies, sorry to say default, the normal, the telos of why those bodies are around and are here are to create more bodies through heterosexual relationships.
I have to stop you. Telos sounds Greek, and I believe they are all dead white men.
Oh, shit.
They are all dead white men.
Homophobic.
I'm curious what you think is the limit between these two, because these are two really opposing views. You can either be someone who believes that, okay, humans are instinctive creatures. We act on patterns that are built into our evolutionary matrix or our makeup, or it's social construction. And kind of how, as an individual, it's, for me, I know it's kind of weird to think about this stuff, because I observe these patterns in myself, and the more I understand evolutionary psychology, the more I see them in me and in society. But kind of how do you deal with that on an individual level? Like, what should your perspective be? Like, is an instinct less of an instinct if you know about it?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So, like you said, evolutionary psychology does tend to focus on, sort of more, this word is controversial, but it's more innate drives and instincts and behaviors. And
controversial, innate drives is controversial. You can't say it. You get canceled if you're in the Ivy League Academy, which Rob Henderson's faced that. And this guy came out of foster homes and foster care and all that stuff. And the reason he came up with the luxury belief idea is he started noticing that since he came from a world that all these other Ivy League students didn't come from, that they were going around espousing these. It's kind of like the same concept of like, you start putting on top hats or monocles or having long fingernails, and they're all kind of showing that I have these little items that are unnecessary items. I have these unnecessary items on my body. It used to be a way to show wealth. And now it's gauche to show that kind of wealth. So how do you do that sort of thing? You have a luxury belief. You show that, hey, I can have these beliefs that don't really jive and don't really make sense and aren't really necessary, but they show my status.
Yeah,
that's human centered to share. I think those are important to understand. Just because so you mentioned the naturalistic fallacy that just because things tend to be a certain way, that doesn't necessarily mean that's how they should be. But I think that if you have an idea of how things should be, you should at first understand, before you get to that step, at least understand how things are.
That's the main point. Figure out how it is first. It's not just your constructs of constructs of constructs.
Well, he says you got to figure out how things are, but I feel like they wouldn't say it directly, but the answer to that would essentially just be like, but things aren't.
Yeah, it's the reality thing. And these guys are saying, well, the reality is just all these constructs, and it's not, you're not dealing with real reality. Real reality is we are all evolved from heterosexual parents.
Particularly good example of this, because this is how knowledge is meant to work. It's meant to build. But if it's starting from an ideological premise in the first place and then building on that, we're just getting towards increasing insanity. So one very popular text within feminist studies is called Doing Gender. Now, this one starts with the assumption that men and women are psychologically and cognitively exactly the same, and that the reason that different gendered behaviours exist is because society has socialised women into being subordinate and men into being dominant. So this is the thesis of this. Since this paper, there have been at least a dozen which explicitly draw on those same concepts. There's now undoing gender and redoing gender and doing gender in the workplace. And so it looks as though it has begun with this one solid idea and then built upon the knowledge, but it is ideology building on ideology until you end up with some completely bizarre conclusions, such as that heterosexual men are only attracted to women because they've been taught to be. There's, the idea that we are a sexually reproducing species isn't something that can be considered.
We're not committing the naturalistic fallacy that you must do that because it's natural, but you got to start with the Chesterton fence thing we're starting. You got to know why the fence was there first before you go ripping it down.
Extended his radius on Tinder to include the rest of the city, which the outskirts of the city are actually more working class, more poor people. Then he started to see profiles of young women, and he said about half of them were single moms. And to me, this is quite a stark example of a luxury belief, such that the sort of beliefs that are broadcast by the former, i.e. the class that tends to go to elite universities, trickle down and over time influence the behavior of the latter, of these young working class women who, like you're saying, they don't have the same amount of social capital, cultural capital, access resources, and so on to withstand a sort of sexually promiscuous lifestyle. And not only that, I haven't talked as much about this, but I'm thinking more about this too, is that I guess, I don't know if this would count as social capital necessarily, but the kinds of people who are around them. Look, I grew up with these kind of guys too. So for better or worse, if you're a young woman at an elite university, the kinds of guys you're fooling around with or whatever, if something were to happen, they're more likely to help you out. Whereas, a lot of poor working class males, if something were to happen, they're not going to necessarily be the most helpful people in emergency situations. So
that's one little issue. He has 20 different ones. I probably won't be able to pull up all of them. And there's this other one, there's this decoupling effect that's happening, not staying around families. He talks about the increase of violence that we're having in our society that people are talking about so much, are coming from these broken homes. The increase of violence, the increase of, if you increase the amount of partners you're around, you increase the options for abuse, sexual abuse of children, because the just by basic percentages, the more adult males that your kids are exposed to, the more options or more likelihood there is that they will be exposed to sexual abuses.
The dynamics between the man and the woman, but also the broader community. So in the past, if a man got a woman pregnant, the neighborhood and the community were like, you need to marry her, you need to take care of her. But once the pill came on the scene, then it was like, well, does he need to stay? She got pregnant. Whose fault was it really? And so it had these sort of trickle down effects. And I always find it interesting, these sort of second order consequences that really I doubt anyone in 1960 would have thought that way. They just think here's this pill. If you go back to 1955 and you tell people, if you just ask people a question, that in the future there will be this sort of magical, inexpensive pill that would, control whether someone got pregnant, whether you have children. Do you think in the future there will be more single mothers or fewer? Do you think there will be sort of more stable families or fewer orphanages, foster care, whatever? I would imagine, I'd be very surprised if anyone said there would be more, right? This pill, it's magic. Why would you have more? But that's
stuff doesn't play out like you think it does when you rip down the fences.
And vaguely ethnic internalized all the way.
What's that?
I dropped out for a second there. But
it's just talking about more of downstream issues of ripping up all the constructs of society that they think they're so free and willing to go do, and how. So I've got 3 different videos. I'll post them all in the thing. People should follow Rob Henderson for them. But he talks about things like the increase of broken families, the increase of children without fathers, the increase of kids being exposed to more adult sexual partners of their mothers. All those sorts of things have downstream effects that do lead to types of things like people are cocking their heads back and screaming about, like mass shootings and that type of stuff nowadays. There are downstream effects to ripping down the constructs that are just there because they're just dumb constructs, and we could get to a free, happier revolution on the other side of these constructs. There's a million and one things downstream from the things that you think you can just rip out the fence for.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's one of the greatest ironies of feminism is that if you want to maximize the likelihood that a young boy grows up to be a rapist, is raise him without a dad. It's that simple.
And these ripping down the constructs, they almost all lead towards more decoupling, less dads, more kids exposed to more dangerous things or less guidance when they're young. And he's got the stats and the statistics back it up. People should follow Rob Henderson a whole lot about what he's talking about. And he has a newsletter, and he also, the Ivy League tries to cancel him because, you know, their luxury beliefs, they don't think about downstream of how this might affect. I mean, I know some girls who got into the sexual revolution. I'm going to sleep with everybody and all that sorts of stuff. And I know Flips knows some of them too. And these were girls who were working 3-4 different jobs, and they're doing that with guys who were not going to be there when they got the situations, and situations with abortions came up, and then they ended up having the kids and that sort of stuff. And they're having difficult lives, and they would have been better off not ripping down Chesterton's fence. And I'm pretty sure every single one of them to a T, especially as life goes on, would go, yeah.
Well, we have all these liberative things like the pill he's talking about, and we hold those as a sacred cow, and that there can be no, like, things that I like cannot be bad. I'll be angry if you say that there might be a downside to a thing that I like. And I think of Christopher Hitchens, one of his last interviews. He had previously said about alcohol, he had said, I think that if you can take more from the liquor than the liquor can take from you, then go for it. Yeah, and they asked him about that, and he said at the end of his life, they asked him about that quote, and he was like, well, you know, I guess I would say now, if you can kind of lay off on the booze and on the smoking, then maybe do it.
There's so much to do with that. It's not a naturalistic fallacy. We all believe that you are free to try and attempt to do, but the John DeLynns of the world are so into informed consent and all that stuff. You should have some informed consent, that when you're going to go try to rip down age-old constructs, you might be falling into a pit of problems. That's all there is to it. And you're welcome to take that gamble. You totally are, but don't go listening to a bunch of these bozos who go around who have luxury beliefs or have the availability to fail upwards or get taken care of by somebody. Maybe it's not going to work out exactly the same for you and your situation. And you don't even have to be a poorer person to have a negative effect, where you can be perfectly rich and have that all just turn out to be a nightmare too. This is one last little thing, because they talk about the constructs and all that sorts of stuff. The rat utopia, people don't like bringing it up that much, but there's just absolutely like a truth to it. Have you ever looked into the rat utopia?
Yeah.
So this whole entire thing is they're talking about constructs, and maybe none of this ever had to exist or any sort of thing like that. You need to understand that you're a post-scarcity world, and in the post-scarcity world, things start going like they go in the rat utopia world. And what also that can lead to, the big scary thing that undoing all the constructs when you just have a completely luxury full life of everything, is complete societal collapse. Could be down at the end of it too. That's one of the things they point out in this.
Why was the universe 25 experiments so important for mankind? Let's talk about it. Ethologist John Calhoun has held a number of fascinating experiments since the 1960s. And
So he took a bunch of mice, and he put the mice in a utopia. He put them in a place where they had no predators and all the food they want, just to watch what would happen, because he could watch it happen quickly over generations.
And they invented warp drive?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. No, it went the other way.
Infections. The experimental mice were under the constant supervision of veterinarians, their health status constantly monitored. Food and water security was so thought out that 9,500 mice could eat at the same time without experiencing any discomfort, and 6,144 mice consumed water and without experiencing any problems. Space for mice was more than enough. The first problem of the lack of shelter can only occur when a population size grew to over 3,840 mice. However, such a large number of mice had not been in the tank. The maximum size of the population observed at the level was 2,200 mice. The experiment began with only 4 pairs of mice, 1 male, 1 female. They then began to multiply rapidly. This period of development Calhoun called Phase A, and Stage B began when the first mice was born. This is the stage of exponential growth of the population size in the tank under ideal conditions. The number of mice doubled every 55 days. But then starting with the 315th day of the experiment, the population growth rate had slowed down significantly, and now the number had doubled every 145 days, which marked the entry into the third phase, Phase C. At this point in the tank, about 600 mice formed a hierarchy and some social life. There had become less physical space than before, and with only 600 mice. Patterns arose. There was a category of outcasts who were being driven to the center of the tank. They often became victims of aggression. To distinguish the outcasts, they were bitten by the nails. They had torn hair and traces of blood in the body. The lack of appropriate social roles had been caused by the fact that under ideal conditions, the tank gave the older mice longer lives and it didn't give room for the younger rodents. So often, aggression was aimed at a new generation of individuals born in the tank. After the expulsion of the males broke psychologically, they showed less aggression. They did not want to protect their pregnant females and perform any social roles, although they occasionally attacked other individuals that were considered rejected. Females who were preparing to give birth became more and more nervous as a result of the growth of the males being more passive. They became more vulnerable to random attacks. As a result, the females began to show aggression and often fight, protecting the offsprings. Females will often resort to killing their cubs and move to the top slot. Hermits became aggressive and refused to reproduce. As a result, the birth rate had dropped substantially and young mortality reached significant levels. Soon began the last stage of the existence of the project, Phase D, or the phase of death as it was called by John Calhoun. The symbol of the stage is the emergence of a new category of mice, called the beautiful. These included males showing uncharacteristically kind behavior, refusing to fight and fight for females in territory. They showed no interest in mate and are prone to a passive lifestyle. Beautifuls only ate, drank, slept, and purified their skins, avoiding conflicts and the implementation of any social functions. They received this name unlike most of the other inhabitants of the tank. They had no trace of hard-fought battles, scars, and tear wool. Their narcissism had become legendary. Also, the researchers were stunned by the lack of desire for the beautifuls to actually mate with anyone. Female beautifuls would refuse to breed and escape into the upper tank nest to become the majority. The average age of the mice in the last stage of the existence was 776 days, 200 days exceeding the upper limit of reproductive age. The number of pregnancies was low and soon was 0. Endangered mice started showing homosexual behavior and aggression in excess of vital resources. Cannibalism flourished even though there was a lot of food to go around. Females refused to bring up their cubs, sometimes even killing them and eating them. Calhoun was asked about the reasons for the emergence of a group of rodents called the beautiful. He drew a direct analogy with humans, explaining that the key human trait, his natural destiny, is to live in the conditions of pressure, tension, and stress. Mice give up the struggle, choosing an unbearable lightness of being turned into autistic handsomes, capable of only the most basic functions, the absorption of food and sleep, and in principle became not capable of such powerful and complex behavior. Calhoun draws parallels with many modern men, capable of only the most routine, everyday activities in order to maintain the physiological life, but the spirit was already dead. What was expressed in Universe 25 was the ability to overcome and, most importantly, to be under pressure. He concluded,
So, I mean, is all of that an exact one-to-one grafting?
Well, I don't know, because I don't think the scientist that did this understood the naturalism fallacy. Actually,
They did this.
Did he have a Twitter? Because I bet we could find him saying the N-word at one point, which totally invalidates this experiment.
They did this twice. They did the whole thing twice. It all happened 2 different times.
Oh, shit.
And the whole entire, do you remember the Rats and Nim?
Yeah.
The Rats and Nim is based off of that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. To me, it's blatantly obvious. I mean, maybe we don't graft 1-to-1 onto mice, but it's blatantly obvious that there's something about a post-scarcity society that starts falling into deconstructing all those types of things. But in both of the cases, it came around to complete colony collapse, complete death, not just like a culling back or anything like that. And to me, there is some sort of concept that just ripping apart and ripping to shred all these types of things is some sort of level of that type of degradation going on in our world. And is it a naturalistic fallacy? Am I saying it should be this or it should be that? All I'm saying is I think people should stop and think, well, this one of my biggest complaints with Sam is she's such a big, we're just determinist. We can't help being what we are. And that's like, she's doubled past beyond what we're trying to say. of saying, we're just saying, hey, realize that you're a being in the world. You're a being that actually has genes and actually has an evolutionary background and all that stuff. And
the
there's
construct, the
Yeah.
construct that she's talking about is called the universe and the laws of reality.
Yeah.
That's the construct we're all trapped in.
So it's like it's both a denial. They're both denying the actual nature of the bodies and that we're stuck in, of the physical world that we're having to figure out and play with, and our natural breeding processes, all that stuff. They want to deny that, and at the same time say we're completely stuck 1,000% in being what we are. That to me is one of the most ultimate cognitive dissonances. Like she said, IQ was problematic, but if you're somebody who's a determinist, IQ is like this big, and your whole determinism is like this big on like how much you can interact outside of your capabilities. It's so like, what are you talking about? Figure out for real the stuff that we really are stuck in, which is our bodies and our genetic evolutionary needs and desires and tendencies. But realize then you still do have choice after that, and some of that choice that you should choose is I don't know, aiming upwards or beware what could fall apart.
Because the other great irony here is, of course, that because what Sam is pushing here is wrong for the exact same reason that Mormonism and so many other religions are wrong, is that Mormonism posits that we are something other than our bodies, and that there exists existences outside of existence, that there's this other thing beyond physical reality. She's in the same place. Mormons are wrong for that reason, and she's wrong for that reason. No, we are our bodies. We don't have, we are not a spirit in a body. We are not an identity in a body. We are our bodies.
And you can take some agency for that, of which way you aim and take direct and go after things. And you've got to be aware of problems that can happen downstream that you might not be aware of, that are things that come from nature and reality that you guys keep going on about, of dealing with reality. We're in agreement. Deal with reality. Let's deal with reality here.
I mean, at least the Mormons and the religions acknowledge that there is a supernatural belief there, and they kind of claim it as just it's just logic,
Yeah. No, I have more respect for Mormons because they admit it's faith.
Yeah.
Whereas Sam doesn't admit that it's a faith.
No.
But I don't get.
Faith is a dirty word.
If I'm expressing enough, like how much like her determinism and her hating of constructs is just two opposite things coming out of her mouth at the same time. Does it?
Yeah.
It doesn't. It doesn't make a lick of sense to me.
It's literally impossible to act in a way that you legitimately believe in determinism completely.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of a product of believing in strict determinism, is that people will point out where it doesn't make any sense because it has to make no sense, basically.
Do we have free will, and is there a God? Are the same question with the same answer? Doesn't matter.
But then they're also so positive that they can just overcome all nature and re-engineer everything. Not having, I mean, that's the ultimate problem with most Marxists. Somebody once said that Marxism is a great idea for bees. Marxism is a great idea, but it's wrong species.
Yeah.
And you got to understand that we're stuck in these meat bodies, and your determinism claims to understand that, but then your anti-constructionism.
All right. Have we got to wrap up soon?
Yeah, I gotta head out.
Plus, I've got a total change of subject that I want to run something past you guys on. Total change of subject, but I sent a link in the linkatizer in the chatterizer.
Where? In
Facebook? I can put it there. It's in the StreamYard chat. Let me
I don't see it.
Oh.
Jared, if you need to run, you can run if you need.
Well, this will only take a second.
I mean,
I want Jared. I see a drum set behind there, so I want to see. I sent it in your Facebook.
Oh, okay.
I sent it to your Facebook.
He sent it in the.
Oh, it didn't appear to me for some reason.
Because I'm a white racist colonialist that has never thought of anything outside my culture. The other day I was researching Eastern Iranian speaking people or Eastern Persian speaking people, and I discovered this Pamiri music, which there's a rhythmic thing that's common to all of this that's just it's utterly different. Like, it's amazing that, like, because, you know, like we always say, that, you know, no one's going to invent a new chord. You know, rhythm is still based in numbers no matter what. And yet there's something in this that's just kind of different. Can you open it up and play it on the...
Can you hear that?
It's got this, like, this weird
pulsing.
Like, just skip ahead somewhere ahead and see if it does the same thing.
I mean, it fits within like a rhythm, but you're right. It has a
It's got this kind of weird, like this is,
it sounds like the whole, like the song itself is a strict rhythm, but within
It is a weird rhythm.
Like within the rhythm, they do weird things. That's kind of funny.
Yeah.
That's hard to follow, even.
Yeah, no, that seems like if you try to like count it out, like, you know,
I wouldn't know how to write
with
it.
our Western, with our Western notions about music, that just seems totally unreal, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm
about to get I drank way too much coffee.
Alrighty,
I gotta head out, but that was cool. But it was good to meet you, Flip. I hear I'm not supposed to call you Felipe.
Oh,
Felipe.
You should be one of the only people in the world.
Oh, yeah,
to know.
No, I know. He was.
Oh, you said the
Chris was-
one on purpose.
Yeah.
Did you adopt a soccer team while you were there?
I was Colorado.
Colorado? Oh, they must be like in low leagues or something.
I don't know. I don't know anything. I don't really like soccer. All the missionaries tried to get into it. There was the Gremios and the Colorados in.
Oh yeah. Well, those are both lower league teams now, so I guess all your teams are crap.
Yeah. Well.
Alrighty.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys
later.